2025, are you ready to rock? Dave's Killer Bread is ready to rock 2025 and your reset this January with killer taste, killer nutrition, and a killer sweepstakes to win a VIP concert prize pack with round-trip airfare, luxury hotel stay, and much more. Text RESET to 73876 and enter for a chance to win. Dave's Killer Bread. Bread amplified. No purchase necessary. Visit daveskillerbread.com/reset for details.
Hey, and welcome back into the Sackheads Radio Show. We did cut it a little bit short on our break because we didn't want to waste any time getting Scott and Judith Powell on with us. Scott and Judith, are you there?
I'm here. Scott's coming.
Hey, how are you?
We're good. How are you? Can you hear us good?
Absolutely. Hear you just fine. I thank you so much for joining us this evening. You guys have a really cool story. First of all, how you just started writing is kind of a neat story. And then you wrote this 3-part series, the John Bates series, Rebels, Rebellion, Revolution. And when you're ready, I'd like you to first explain how you guys got into writing. And then I want to cover a little bit of the book.
Okay. It was 2008, and I started to kind of start taking myself seriously as a writer. I've been stay-at-home mom, we homeschool. I thought I'm going to spend some time working on myself and working on my brain. So I'm going to start writing every day. And so I was writing every day for a while, and then in the fall of 2008, Scott lost his job. And he comes home from work, and he's like, honey, I've lost my job. And so I start to kind of take all the papers off my desk. As you can imagine, my computer desk, I had back research stuff on there and all kinds of just notes and stuff all over the computer. And I start kind of clean it up because I'm thinking I have to make way for him to look for a job. And he's going to need his computer, and I have to move out of the way. The book's going to have to go on hold. And he looked at me in that moment, and he said, is this the one? And I was like, the one? He goes, yeah, is this the one book you're going to finish? Is this going to be the one? And I said, yes, I'm going to finish this book. It's going to be a great book. And he said, then finish it. And
wow.
I told him, go ahead.
No, I think that's kind of amazing because I just think of my situation. If I was in that situation, I'd be like, honey, you got to move. I got to look for Craigslist. I got to be digging a ditch by tomorrow. Like, I got to be doing something because, it shows the faith that he had in you and your ability. But please go on.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I start writing every day. And at the time, we had made a plan that if we were employed, that I could make bread, that we would, I was still homeschooling, and we would scrimp and say we wouldn't buy out anything, we wouldn't eat any fast food or anything like that. We'd make everything. And so I'm making all this stuff and doing the laundry and taking care of kids for homeschool. And he's like, how much are you writing a day? And I'm like, well, I'm writing 10 pages a week. And he said to me, we're going to be employed forever if you're going to write 10 pages a week. You need to write 10. You need to write 10 pages a day. And I said, well, I can't do that and make bread. And he said, teach me how to make bread, and you write, and I'll make bread, and I'll do the homeschooling for the kids. And so we kind of switched jobs for a little bit, and I did all the writing, and I got all the way done. And when I got all the whole book finished, written, I gave it to him, and he did all the editing. At the end of the time, when he was all the way through all the editing and going over it the first time, we had $1,000 left in our savings, and I said to him, now you can have a job. 1 hour later, Sean, he had a call for a job.
No kidding.
It was a miracle.
Well, and I was going to say, you want to talk about miracles and divine intervention. That's pretty outstanding.
It was a real miracle, and but we had this book, but it wasn't really complete. And at the time, I was trying to convince Scott to help me write it, to kind of add in, especially the fighting scenes. He's a mixed martial artist. And I was like, if you could just write the fighting scenes, it'd be so much better. And I was constantly begging him. And it was when we sent our new book. It was when I sent it's our newest published book, but it was written first, Last Enchantress, out to agents and different people. And they said, look, it's great, but you need a new beginning. And I was like, I didn't know how to cut those 10 pages off It just felt like, I know in the article he wrote, Scott reminded me, I told him, it felt like I'm cutting off my own arm. I don't know how I'm gonna do this and rewrite 10 pages. And he goes, I know what to do, and he took over. So he was really cool. And then when he started doing the 10 pages, go ahead.
I think it's hard too, and I'm not going to pretend to be an author, but even writing articles on our website, and I've written some articles on some other websites. When you get that back from the person editing, and you put your heart and soul in, you have a plan when you go into writing most things, and you have your points that you try to get in, etc. And when somebody comes back to you and says, "Hey, this is great, but in my case, the first paragraph, or your case, the first 10 pages has to go," it's kind of a shot in the gut, and I don't think people realize that. They look at it like, "Oh, it's 300 pages. What's the first 10?" But you put all that work in to make sure that those first 10 kind of set up the rest.
Yeah. And you don't really know what to do. You have to almost begin again and start again. And so Scott took over because I know what to do. We had gotten done just recently up to this point where he had written a series of letters to people in authority that would normally wouldn't act on something, but did because his letters persuaded them. I'm like, you're a great writer. You're a great persuasive writer. You need to really help me write this book. And so he went in, he wrote my whole new beginning of the first of the Last Enchantress. And then he went in with me and I said, you keep going through it. Go through the whole thing. And he just kind of put details and things. It was almost like he could see what I could see. It was really amazing because he saw what I saw. If you asked me to take something like Stephanie Meyer's or Rawlings' book and kind of write in between what they wrote and write my own stuff in it, it would be a totally different book. I don't think it'd be anything they envisioned. But with Scott and I, it works perfectly. I go through and write, and then he goes back in and just puts in all the details and does a really great job. And it works really well together, and we can take turns writing, and so we get done a little bit faster that way, I think, too.
Well, and you described it perfectly in the article you wrote for us. You kind of do the framework, and he comes in and does the interior decoration.
Hardy fiber cement siding is proven to withstand water, pests, and fire better than wood-based siding. And it looks better while doing it. Hardy siding has been chosen for 10 million homes and counting. See the proof at jameshardy.com.
Not a lot of MMA guys do interior decoration really well, so I think that's impressive that he can come in and take care of that. But I think it's an amazing symbiotic relationship, and it goes to any partner you work with, and obviously with you guys, you're well beyond work partners. You're married and kids, and you guys are in love, but you get that symbiotic relationship with some people that you work with, where it's that finishing of each other's sentences, and in this situation, it was the book.
Yeah, it was really that. It was exactly like that, and it was incredible to me because the book became a better book. It grew from there, and it was like it was meant to always work like that. And we turned around and we have Everybody Has Rebels. I had written a book at the time. We just called it A Change of Heart, and I just written it, and it was really kind of basic. And then Scott got in there and took it, and he made it the John Bates series, and which is Rebels, Rebellion, and Revolution. And he took that and ran with that really well. And I think for boys and especially libertarians, Rebel series is really awesome. Last Enchantress is cool too. It's more symbolic. It's more like Wizard of Oz symbolism. Why Rebels, Rebellion, and Revolution is more in your face of, it's important to have. So it's kind of, we decided we're just going to put the stuff out that you need to do in order to be free. The book is really has a lot of pro firearms, pro food storage, pro life. I mean, the whole series is kind of.
Well, it's very pro-patriotic as well. Now, kind of walk us through, introduce the books a little bit. Tell us kind of the basis for it and the build-up. And obviously, you don't want to give too much away because we want people to go read the book, and you can get the links to the book on SHR Media right now. But kind of set it up and give us a little tease, if you will.
Okay. Scott's telling me I have to do all the talking.
That's not true. I heard him cough once, and anytime he wants to jump in and say hi, he's more than welcome to.
I'm really shy, Sean. I am an interior designer kind of type of guy.
Come on, dude.
He's calling me out.
I didn't want to correct you the fact that it's not global warming anymore. It's climate change and the natural weather that took up. Well, I'm from Vermont, actually, originally born and raised there. So that snow up in Buffalo, New York is normal. No one needs to worry about it.
No,
the economy's good. Immigration will be worked out tomorrow. Tomorrow night we're going to find out how we're going to be fixing our immigration. I'm glad to hear about that. So
everything's going to be fine by Saturday.
Keith, I need that. We should go off natural energy. I agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's definitely shy, Judith. I can see what you mean by that. And he also doesn't have a funny sense of humor either. I can't imagine. It must be really dry in the house when you guys are writing. So tell us a little bit about the series.
Okay. Okay. So with Rebels, it takes place. We debate about how far in the future it is. Like 20 to 30 years in the future from right now. The economy collapsed. The world economy totally collapsed, and there was rioting in the streets. America stands up and says, hey, we'll take care of you, but you have to surrender to us. And so pretty much the world falls in line behind America, and basically America is almost like America succeeds where Hitler failed. It finally takes over the world, pretty much, maybe a few little tiny exclusions. But pretty much America has taken over. Well, John has grown up his whole life with an America that's a whole worldwide America. And it's not libertarian and it's not free. It's very much a dictatorship. And so he's living like that when he's in with the early military, because that's where all the stuff is. If you're in the military, you're in the enforcement of the state, you get better stuff. And he's in this group that his dad wants him to be in because he gets to work with firearms and he gets to work with self-defense. When it's discovered that he has a bad heart. And he's chosen out above hundreds of other people who need heart surgery, that he's going to get his heart because he's important to the state. And so it kind of goes from there.
Yeah, Jill, Sean, the story, what it does is it basically shows that this young man where the state makes a mistake. They see his physical talent and his capacity, but they don't realize what's really being taught in his house. In other words, during this time, the Constitution is outlawed. If you were to be found with a copy of the Constitution or with a Bible and teaching what they consider propaganda during that time, we consider truth, you could be executed for doing that, and you'd be considered a traitor. And as the series goes on, you'll find that John will rebel against what the state wanted him to do. In other words, to enforce their laws and their propaganda, and that he ends up becoming a fugitive, and that they come after him while John is figuring out how to escape and how to continue to protect his family and those he loves, and to fight for what he knows to be this great nation's rights. And we run it. It's obviously it's got some science fiction in it. I mean, there's some enhancements to him physically that makes it more entertaining. The idea underlying in the story is to push the idea that we need to stand in that. We want the youth in particular, because we have a lot of them coming in 2016. They'll be able to vote, and they'll be able to make decisions that help this nation to go in the right direction. I mean, it's sad to say that today's world we live in, we're allowing it, like my dad says, one slice at a time, to be taken away from us and become a welfare state, because we're basically coming at that point where 50% of the American people, whether they like it or not, they're on some sort of federal or state assistance.
Yep.
Unemployment, as you and I know, is definitely at 5.8%. It's the best it's been since 2008 or whatever they lied about. And the book itself is reinforcing, if you were to stay where we're at today, that we're going to be heading to that direction, whether it's an economic collapse, whether we have some sort of, non-Ebola scare, because that's under control. We know that as well.
Yeah, we're safe.
We're actually safe, And the irony
just
of it all,
keep calm. Everything's fine.
Yeah, wear a mask, a couple gloves, get some duct tape. You should be all good, right? And never mind the incubation period. We have a nurse up north. She knows better than we do.
Yeah.
It's okay to go outside, bike ride, and, the idea is, with the book series, is to waken people up to realize we have a choice, and we can change this, and we don't have to go through these consequences. Now, do I believe we've gone to a point where there's going to be some suffering? Yeah. When I was laid off back in 2008, September, at the end of that month, that day when I was laid off, the stock market almost dropped 800 points.
Yep.
And people don't realize the stock market right now is inflated. It's not real. It's not being backed by anything realistically. It's
right. Well,
and
that's where you start talking about the gold standard, the silver standard, or the imaginary money that we play with.
Yes, exactly. And I talked to my dad. I said, it starts back in Nixon when they took away that gold standard. All these things, and prior to even that, when we took away the Bible from within the schools, when we started Social Security, and over time we've done food stamps, unemployment, we've done obviously Medicaid. There's a lot of things people feel they're entitled to. And I'm going to tell you, the Rebel series is many people say, well, it's just a book. Well, it's a book that tells a story that what's going to happen. And the fact is that you may not pay the price, but our children's children will pay the price. And how many countless lives will be lost because, thanks to Obamacare, you and I will have the best future ever. As long as as long as your life points are worth something, of course, we can't say there's putting a value on people's lives. Let's look at the VA hospitals.
They do that all the time.
And so a lot of the book series goes in involvement concerns of welfare, goes into the Obamacare, goes into how the economy goes into disease and how people will suffer needlessly. And there's no reason to. And we just want to kind of help America remember how great we are, but we need to make that change. We can't count on people in office to make those changes for us. We have to make those changes.
Well, and we talk a lot about the show, too, how like you said, kids are being raised to believe that government is everything and that they give you everything you need, and all you have to do is just smile, wave, and just kind of keep going. We've lost our exceptionalism as a nation. Not all of us, but a large percentage, more and more every single day. I'm sure, I don't know if your kids play with other kids, but, you interact with other people who are part of that mentality of, hey, you know what, it doesn't matter. What do you mean you have to pay a cell phone bill? I got an Obama phone. I can call whoever I want. I don't know what I literally heard, I don't know what the big deal is about Obamacare. I've been getting free health care from the state pretty much my whole entire life. Like, we have been raised to believe that everything, we're like cattle. And as soon as the hay starts getting thrown around, we just kind of show up and eat. And then once the hay's gone, we go back and do nothing all day until the next day when the hay comes again. And eventually we're going to be turned into prime rib. Tasty, tasty, tasty prime rib. And that's something I agree with you. I kind of laughed a little bit earlier when Judith said, it said about 30 years in the future. And then as you really get into telling the story, I'm like, maybe not 30. You guys might be a little bit closer than that.
My argument's 15. He's like, it's not 15. I'm like, that's 15.
Well, Scott, you may be ready for the slaughter earlier. I mean, that's not my fault. You might be a nice, tasty rib sooner than others, but I appreciate you taking one for the team, by the way, for doing that.
I will not. I'm not saying me. Trust me. I am built for that right now at this point in my life, but that's not my plan. I will go down fighting if I need to. A couple people. My
dad's generation is going to go first. I thank him foremost for getting us to this point. I tell him of the baby boomer generation, thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. It was wonderful what they've left to us, isn't it? I mean, that is just heavenly. They've done such a great job of really setting us up. Yes, please. And I know we have a couple quote unquote baby boomers who weren't involved in that, but no, it's a scary time. And when you read your book and you really start to go through it, you start seeing similarities in today's nation. And I always have a problem, and not because there's something wrong with it, but it always kind of scares me a little bit when you have a book that, like you said, 30 years in the future and a little bit of science fiction, but as you're reading through, you're like, yeah, that's kind of real. Okay, and that's kind of real. Yeah, that's kind of real too. I think I'm going to finish this crying under the bed. Because if you really are, if you really kind of pay attention, how did you know? It's slowly but surely. We've said right along, it will never be an outright grasp. We will never, I said it before and I'll say it again, nobody will ever stand up in the White House and declare themselves emperor, because we talked about this last week. The country would go insane at that point. It's too in your face. So they kind of take the Cass Sunstein approach, where everything's a nudge. They chip away at this, they chip away at that. Sometimes they use shame to get you away from, for Christians, Christianity and the Christianity belief. They use shame for everything that they try to push. Oh, if you're not for Obamacare, then you want people to die. Oh, if you're not for amnesty, then you must think that all illegals are horrible individuals, blah, 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 blah. They constantly do that shame and nudge, where they work on your emotions, and they take away the literal argument. They don't want to have that literal argument, the progressives and the left don't, because that you can contest what they're saying. But they know if they win people's emotional response, if they get that out there, then people, well, yeah, of course I think that, John's a good guy, and I know he's here illegally, but, if he's okay, the rest of them are as well. They do that to you. So it will never be one fell swoop. It'll never just be taken because this country wouldn't stand for it, but they will continue to knock it away piece by piece by piece. And then 30 years in the future, we could be looking at the John Bates series in real life.
Well, what's interesting about it, Sean, is that the biggest thing is about it started in education, where they've limited the truth to be taught to kids today, as well as media. I'm not saying yourself, obviously, but general media is not sharing the truth. We know a lot about the Kardashians. We know what's going on with Bill Cosby. I heard you talk about that earlier before you came on. All the non-essentials. I'm not saying there's not some things worthwhile knowing, but generally speaking, we're not hearing about Benghazi or the Fast and Furious. Most people weren't even aware of the Marine that was stuck in Mexico for almost 7 months. Things that are very vital that what make up America today. We're busy worrying about, I'm Roll Tide. I'm from Alabama. They're number one in the nation, but that's not my first concern.
Right.
It concerns me when we're talking to people and saying, where's this money come from to paying all these programs? They go, look, I don't really worry about that as long as I qualify for it. And to give an example, some time ago, when we got hit with a hurricane down here in Birmingham area, one of my employees, she was in the designated area where FEMA was, and she asked me, she says, can I leave work early today? I says, why? She says, well, they're giving out free food stamps. I says, were you hit and affected? She says, no, but I'm in that area where we can get it anyways. And there's no type of attitude of, go ahead.
And I'm from the Northeast, and back in, I want to say it was 2001, 2002, we had some pretty severe flooding in northern Massachusetts, where FEMA came in, and it may have actually been just before Katrina, and they declare, okay, this place is a state of emergency. If you live in this place, you can go to FEMA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I happened to across a ton of people who suffered no damage whatsoever, but they were getting their FEMA bucks because the line's there. I might as well jump in it and get it, And that exact situation happens, and that happens with welfare too. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago, where the people who really need it don't get it, and the same thing with disability. And the same thing can be said with some veterans benefits too, is there are people that take it that don't necessarily need it. And I don't mean veterans in general. I mean money that we could be putting into the VA and taking care of our vets that we're using for people who are scamming the system.
You're saying people on disability, they shouldn't be on it? Is that
I know, right? I'm some kind of monster to suggest that somebody may be screwing the system here and there. And as well as I do.
Their injuries? I hope so.
That would be horrible. How would that even happen? And I just read a story not too long ago about a woman who, and this sums up the system in a lot of places, a woman was arrested because she went into a job interview and left 2 children in a car by themselves, very young. I think they were 1 and 3 in the middle of the summer. And she was arrested for child endangerment. Somebody started a fund for her, and this was out in California, that totaled, the fund ended up coming in, I think it was $59,000 that they raised for this woman to take care of her kids, try to get her back on her feet. The community came together and said, yeah, you know what, you shouldn't have left the kids in the car, but you have a sad story. You were trying to do the right thing. Let's see if we can help make this right. All $59,000, they did it somebody did an investigation, was spent on jeans for her, clothes for her, Gucci handbags.
Wow.
Not one thing went to where it was supposed to go. And that was that wasn't the government just giving you free stuff. That was people who opened up their own pocketbooks and said, hey, you know what, we want to help you out. That was what the good of the country is, and what I believe this country still has is the good of the people who are willing to help each other out because we want to, not because we're forced to. And this person would still do that without thinking twice about it. And so, of course, when it comes to the government system and there's no checks and balances, they're absolutely going to run right all over it. You know, I told a story last week about a friend of mine who worked in a welfare office, and literally the woman at the counter was a cousin to the person applying and was telling her what to put down to get more money for her welfare. The system is completely broken, and it's only getting worse. And the more people accept that the system is okay this way and take that handout, and the government's essentially paying them to be complacent against the very thing they're taking part of.
Yeah, but they forget who's paying for it. That's what blows my mind. They think it's like some kind of magic machine that's printing money for them.
Oh, yeah, no. They show. Haven't you ever seen the pictures of the mint when it's producing all that money? It's free, baby. It just keeps coming.
Jefferson said a government that can give you anything can take everything away from you.
Yes.
And the more as a society, as America, that we're bought into a government that gives us literally everything and takes care of, really, even with Obamacare, you think if you're talking against them, and if everybody's on Obamacare and they decide, oh, well, your life points just went down. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, what's funny is how many people buy into the, what was the books there that they turn into movies as well, like the Hunger Games type thing?
Yeah.
And people are like, yay, this book is awesome. I'm like, do you realize that's not an exaggeration either of what the future could hold? Like, the possibilities are there as well. Like, you shouldn't be happy about this. It should be a sad warning, but people don't look around and realize that a lot of the things, and, I go back to Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged, which
right.
The same thing. Like, people didn't pay attention. Look where we are now. A lot of the things that she wrote way back, what it was, 55 years ago now, 58 years ago, whatever it is, are starting to show up now. Because we don't heed the warnings, and we don't pay attention to the past. We don't pay attention to other people's history. We just focus, oh, it's America. This would never happen here. Well, the ideas that are being utilized right now have been implemented in other places, and they learned why they failed, and it's very possible for them to be applied here. We talk about it all the time. Hitler's propaganda was taken directly from Bernays, who was the propaganda for Wilson. Yeah. And it was cut and dry. I mean, there was if you read all the propaganda outline for that was put together, I want to say Goebbels, but I'm wrong, but for Hitler, it was exactly Bernays' book for Wilson. So they get recycled, and then more and more they get kind of cleaned up, and we couldn't sell this, so we have to kind of change how we sell it and change where we go to make people more accepting of it. Cass Sunstein's book is a humongous nudge, is a humongous look into what the progressive left does to get this country to swallow things that are otherwise atrocious.
Well, that's with Rebels. That's one thing we did pull from. We pulled from Hitler, we pulled from communism, and we pulled from even the Dark Ages. And we pulled really what we thought an ultimate totalitarian society would look like for America. Mm-hmm. We pulled from all those places with the idea that they even use religion as a way to hold you down.
Yes.
In the Dark Ages, nobody had a Bible. You couldn't read the Bible. You had to be told what it said. And it was very much a propaganda, hey, the church is in power and the church is in charge. And that wasn't a Christian thing. I think a lot of times Christians get blamed for that. No, that was a power thing or a government thing. The government wanted power. It was the church at the time. The people wanted power, and they used faith, people's faith in God, as like a weapon against them. And we put that into Rebels to say, hey, don't let people. That's one thing that drives me crazy living in the South, and we love living here, but people don't read their Bible. They don't read their Constitution. They don't know what it says, but they're going around spouting what other people say. And it's great to have a minister that tells you what the interpretations of. It's good to have that, but it's better for you to also be reading it. You can't just let someone else tell you what it says.
Well, and I agree with you, and the same thing goes with the Constitution. And when you go to the Constitution, you don't just read the Constitution. Read all the documents by the founding fathers that wrote it going up to the Constitution, why they wrote certain things and how they wrote certain ways. And really their basis for why it's up until now the most successful governing document that's ever been produced in the history of the world. And I will say that with 100% confidence. Yes, it's being perverted now, and we can have that conversation. But as it stood originally, it was a bulletproof governing document that gave power to the people, and that the government would be responsible to the people and not the other way around. And we have since allowed it to become perverted, where government is in control and the people are just the peasants, if you will. And people are okay with that, and it's sad. And if you go back and you read the founding documents, it will show you that this is not how we were intended. You know, George Washington warned us about the two-party system adamantly. And this was a guy that we had to beg to be president because he knew better. It wasn't what he wanted, but he did it because the country called on him to do it, not because he wanted to be a powerful politician. And that history is just lost. And you look at you Scott brought up education earlier. I always bring up 9/11 now. You look at 9/11 and how it's being taught in classrooms today. You know, they're pulling out the Muslim extremist part, and they just put extremists. They're removing the names of the individuals. They're taught that they were upset at America. They kind of blame, you know, in some texts, they're kind of blaming the United States for being attacked. You know, the true history of 9/11 is not being taught. What happened before, what happened afterwards, et cetera, et cetera. You know, but this is a country who thought Al-Qaeda popped up on 9/11 and never existed a day before. And now they're apparently on the run, even though they keep attacking us somehow, which is the most amazing. If they were a quarterback...
They've been paid off, Sean. They don't longer exist.
Well, I was going to say, if they were a quarterback, they'd be the best scramblers ever. It'd still have a high completion rate.
CNN, all the accurate, you know, news stations that tell us the full truth and nothing but the truth.
Yeah.
You know, it's like we don't have illegal immigrants there. They're undocumented individuals.
We call them. I have to correct you there, Scott. We do call them criminal aliens here on this show, because their first act is breaking a law while coming into the law. My partner's not here to tell you that. You know, that's probably one of the.
You know, people ask me about that, and they says I'm not very fair about it. And I says, look, my mom came from South Korea. She came back with my dad when he was in Vietnam. He was stationed over there in the Air Force. She went through the full process of being educated, learning English. She does have a very thick accent, which is kind of funny. You should have her on the show sometime. But as you can tell, I don't speak Korean, unfortunately. I tried one time, said I don't know why I would do that, so there's no one other Korean to talk to. But the point is, my mom went through the process, and she went and took the test, and she's a citizen of the United States now. She didn't do it illegally, and she actually is a productive citizen to the United States and has worked very hard and contributed to the United States. She pays her taxes. She has her own house. She owns her own house, is now retired. But the point is, I'm surprised how people can sit by and say this is okay for them to come in and to use our system for insurance, our health care, our educational system, our food stamps, and so on and so forth, and think this is okay without them paying anything back. I mean, it bothers me enough to know that a lot of them even get tax returns, and a lot of people don't even know that. And it goes back to education. I can't express enough. It needs to go back in the schools. And what you talk about 9/11, it's not about terrorists anymore. It's about us. We hurt this other group's feelings, and so the only way to express it was to shove 2 planes into our towers. And unfortunately, it killed a number of Americans. Is because it's our fault. And I'm kind of tired of hearing it's our fault when really we've done nothing but help the world for the most part. I mean, we're not perfect people, but we've given a great example of freedom and how you can work together as a diverse group. Right now, I mean, we have things like Ferguson, as you know, coming up, and it's ridiculous. I mean, honestly, it's ridiculous. Go ahead.
We've lost our way as a nation, as a whole. Again, not all of us, not the people that pay attention, not our great listeners here on SHR Media, because I have to, kind of kowtow to them a little bit. we've lost our way as a whole as to what is truly important in this world and what is truly detrimental, and that everything else beyond that is kind of a gift. And I don't care if you're religious, non-religious, et cetera, et cetera. The fact that we have our fundamental freedoms and we have the ability to be whoever we want in this country, that can never be taken away according to our Constitution. We don't live in a country where at 15 a government agent walks in and says, "Hey, you're going to work on tanks for the rest of your life," and that's it. And you're going to get paid less than minimum wage, and you're going to work 6 days a week for 16 hours a day. And if you miss a day of work, we're going to beat you repeatedly. No, we get, hey, you're going to go to school. You have the opportunity to have an education. You can choose whatever path you want after that, and be the person that you want to be. You want to have that white picket fence in the house and the 2.5 kids and the 1.5 cars in the driveway? Great. If you want to be that single guy who lives the ultimate bachelor life, absolutely. We have the freedom to be who we want to be. But with that comes the responsibility of maintaining that exact same freedom. And that's something that's where it stops. People be who they want to be, but they don't get to the responsibility portion of maintaining the freedom and making sure that freedom is there for the next generation and the generation after that. I say it all the time. I probably will never be put into the re-education camps if we ever have them in this country, because I will probably be too old at that point. But I worry about the next generation behind me. Huh?
Right. Yes.
I said your life points would be over by then.
Yeah, exactly. Believe me, I think right now my life points would be over. It just depends on who you ask, really.
Well, I need to ask your wife at that point.
You know what? I even think my mother might be like, he's kind of getting near the end. The warranties run out and stuff's starting to go wrong, and it may just be time to junk it. I think that's it. That's kind of where it's getting. And that's fine. I know my place in life. But I think writings like yours are so important for our youth, and so important even for our adults who haven't been shown necessarily, and like I said, a lot of it comes down to parenting. Parents are sometimes just too lazy to express to their children the importance of our freedom and our liberty and what the Constitution is and what our founding documents are. And they've become complacent, and they rely on school. And we can go back, on Lyndon Johnson and all that stuff and talk about the history of why kids have to be sent to school to learn anything because parents are checked out. But at the end of the day, parents rely on schools now to turn around and educate their children both socially and education-wise. We go well beyond. Schools used to be reading, writing, arithmetic. At least they were when I was growing up. And everything else was taught at home. And your responsibility, your morals, your decency, they were all taught at home. And in my case, it was also, I had 2 grandfathers that were World War II. My father was in Vietnam. It was also about the freedoms of this country and the Constitution. And that is something that parents just aren't following through with now. They expect the school to teach it. Well, as well as I do, how many videos have we seen out of schools where the teacher is just teaching just pure propaganda and not sticking to any sort of true education? And that's what our kids are getting.
Honestly, I think you're misunderstanding, because Common Core now is helping clarify those differences. And by the way you and I were raised, that'd be considered abusive today, because we're now allowing our children to communicate to us clearly by texting to us phones to enable us to come closer to them in an emotional way to help them understand their situation. No, but you're right. But that's part of the problem, is that we have gone away from home. And a lot of it is, too, I think, as you know, statistic-wise, there's a lot of kids being raised in single homes, divorce rates up, and the moral compass that we've had in our country has gone down quite a bit. Now, whether religious or non-religious, I think people can agree that thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not lie. Those basic principles should still stand, enabling families to have a firm foundation, but people have decided they want to create their own standard and their own beliefs of which they should be able to follow. And my dad, what my dad calls that today is people's tolerance. It's basically what are you willing to tolerate? And each person has a different tolerance level, and a lot of people want to raise that bar today. And, I mean, as you can see, concerns of different type of marriages going on today. And my dad specialized in child sexual abuse cases. He was a detective up north. And he says, you'll see one day, and he said this years ago, he says, you'll see where our morality standards, concerns of marriage will go down to where eventually we'll have polygamy, and eventually you will see, in which most people will scoff at right now, is child love. In other words, they'll allow openly the abuse of children. And, you know, if you've studied it throughout the world, you know, through other countries, that is already happening right now.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's really scary, but people don't think, how could that ever happen? Well, it's easy. If you don't educate yourself, you don't keep to a certain standard, things become a fast, slippery slope.
Well, like with the book, I was bringing up the book with Rebels to different people, and one guy told me, he goes, well, we can't teach the Bible in schools. We have to teach all this other stuff. And I'm like, first of all, I disagree with you. I think you can teach the Bible in school. There's a real basis to teach it in school. But I'm not saying that. I'm saying is you have a responsibility to teach your kids correct principles, for you to be reading that Bible every night with your kids. You need to be reading it. I mean, let me tell you, if you have children that are struggling with reading, statistically, when the Bible was in schools, we had an 80 to 90% literacy rate in America. Today, it's less than 50% proficiency, which is even anywhere close to what we consider a literacy rate.
Yeah.
The Bible helps kids learn to read, but, I mean, of course, it teaches them moral principles and teaches them where to look for answers, and not so much at the propaganda at schools and at, you know, the government.
Well, and you know, and it's funny, too, because we get caught on this show, too. Something
You
happened
there?
with, here we go. I think we're back now. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I don't know. Sacco is pressing buttons over there, my engineer. He's out of control. He's had a beer and a half, so he's pretty hammered. So I'm trying to get him on like a white wine spritzer, something where he can pace himself, but he goes right to the heavy stuff. But you know, you can still have good morals and ethics that are taught at home, with or without religion. But the problem is it takes work, and it takes understanding that you have to be involved in your children's life. You know, and like I brought up Penn Jillette. I think he's a good example of somebody who is without religion but has really good morals and understanding of our founders and our Constitution. And the fact that just because he doesn't believe doesn't mean that somebody else's rights should be taken away to believe, and or that people who do believe are crazy, you know, which we get a lot of when you talk about atheists versus people that believe in religion. They throw out you're just crazy that there's some sky wizard who does X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, so you're 100% in every single scientist? Yeah, so science has never been wrong? No. You know, we were supposed to be in an ice age in the Middle 80s, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, the universe, they were going to build, I remember in the 90s, I think it was when I was a little girl, I remember my dad saying that they thought they were going to build a telescope that we could see the end of the universe.
Yes, I do remember that, actually.
Do you remember that?
So, yes, that is outstanding. Oh, my goodness. So you look at it and, you know, is there always an exact answer? No. But you have to stick to what we know works. And we know in this country that morals work. But what that did is when people had morals, they weren't so easily deceived because of their morals. Well, if you want to deceive people in order to kind of get them to do your bidding, you know, taking away their morals and replacing it with things that are essentially free and immoral is an easier solution. And, you know, you have kids, you know, if you put 2 vegetables down in a piece of candy, odds are, and you say, all right, you make your choice. You can have the sauerkraut cabbage, the broccoli, or the Snickers bar, and no questions asked. Which one are they going to choose? Right. I would choose the Snickers bar.
The broccoli, to be honest with you.
I'm Snickers bar all
I actually, believe it or not, I'm one of those people. I like the little green balls of death. I like Brussels sprouts. I'm a lunatic. But but I also, when I cook them with bacon, and I cover them with Parmesan cheese and balsamic vinegar. So it's not really Brussels sprouts as much as bacon vegetables. It's an excuse to eat bacon, and I'm still eating my vegetables, so it's okay. But and that's what they've done. They've stopped making people kind of be responsible so they can shove the irresponsible down their throat. And then once you make them essentially drones, like, hey, you know what, I'm getting this free, that free, this free, that free, then you could turn around and start shoving other things down their throat that they may not know they don't want, but hey, why not, right? Because if the government's always been right, then this must be okay too. You know, Obamacare is the prime example of that right now, and immigration is going to be the next example right now.
Well, you know, it's interesting when you go back to the morals is it was Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Paine were writing letters back and forth towards kind of the end of towards the end of Thomas Paine's life, probably obviously end of Benjamin Franklin's life too, is discussing the Bible, and Thomas Paine was arguing that we don't really need it, kind of thing, and because he had kind of gone staunchly atheist at this point, and Benjamin Franklin was like, you know, I see your point in some of these things, but how are we going to teach the morals to the next generation? How are we going to do this? We need to still have the Bible because it has the morals in it. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was a really good and interesting. Here, I mean, this argument's been going on for a long time. It's not just us. This isn't new. We're just not suddenly now we have atheists. It's been going on for a while.
Yeah, it's not like they're not hipsters all of a sudden, where they're like, hey, man, it's just not cool to believe. And you looked at the battle of religions, and, you know, we've talked about this show. We've been battling Muslim extremists since the 1700s as a nation. You know, and some things will never change, and we will always be fighting this battle. I think now it's more apparent to people that this battle is going on because of social media, things like this, the ability to be able to turn on a mic and talk without the FCC getting all over your junk, Twitter and all that stuff. But as wonderful as a tool as those things are, it's also extremely disruptive because of so much bad information that gets thrown out. You know, and you have so many people out there that push things as fact that have no basis for it. And I mean, you know, Judith, I saw you on Twitter all day, and I couldn't keep up with you even if I tried to save my life. But
it was. How you feel.
Oh, that is a proud man who knows not to get himself in trouble. You know, but you watch what people respond to, and just the best one is pictures. And I can remember when the whole thing that was going on with the Bundy Ranch, as awful as that was and what was happening, people were exacerbating it with a lot of falsehoods on both sides through pictures. Here's a picture of the Bundy Ranch of the Bundy stampeding a thing of school children. You know, that was a picture from 30 years earlier in the 60s at the running of the bulls, or, you know, it went back and forth. But people would just swallow that down because we've been taught not to do research, just to accept what we're given as reality. Because, you know, why would people lie to you? Why would anyone ever lie to you? Lies are just ridiculous. Nobody would ever lie to you. Everything is just fine. Just everything's A-okay. Don't sweat it. I think that's what Scott said earlier.
Secured. There's no ISIS within the United States.
The whole life's not dangerous.
There's no silent cells. You know.
And there's no pickles.
Yeah, and I don't know. The cake is a lie. I could keep going, but you know, it is a sad reality that we've come to, and you know, we joke about it on the show all the time because I'm a big believer. If you don't laugh at it, you're going to end up crying under the bed again. That we need to find a way where we need to get a little bit more old-fashioned. We need to get a little bit more old school. You know, take the technology out of your kid's hand. I think technology is a beautiful thing. I really do. I use it all the time. I use it on the show. I use it in my personal life. There's some great things that could be taken out of technology with education, but also it needs to be taught that it's just a tool. It's not everything. Just like government. Government is a tool. It is not everything. It is a tool to give you a certain amount of things that they must provide, and then everything else you're responsible for. You know, it's not a fix-all. There's no fix-all that way. And I think if we could start to get almost, and I hate to say regress, But if we could just get a little bit more old-fashioned,
You need to get regressive instead of progressive. Sorry.
Yes, we do. Did I just coin that phrase? I'm writing that down. Hold on, that's a bumper sticker. It's going to say, "Let's get regressive, baby." Let's get regressive, baby. I like it. Good call on that. I should have you coin all my catch all my intelligent phrases. But little things like, and this is something that my cousin does with his family now, and I think it's the most brilliant thing in the world. He has a family dinner every single Sunday, an old school family dinner, no television. They sit around the big table. They take turns hosting it between him and his sister and his parents, and they bring everyone together and sit down and just talk to each other. And just be involved in each other's life and not just check out so quick to the television or this or that. And I think that's such a brilliant idea because that's a great opportunity to teach your young ones about morals and have that conversation on top of teaching, history. I know growing up for me, when we used to do that with my grandparents, I heard about my grandparents in World War II. I heard about my father in Vietnam. I heard about my father was a cop as well. I heard about those stories. I'd listen to my mother's tale growing up. My mother had an amazing tale. She was adopted, and how all that worked out, and how my grandparents essentially saved her. You hear these amazing things, and you can pick opportunities out to teach morals from that as well. But that's the other thing is we rely on electronics to be our interface of communication. That you lose that time together. You lose that ability together. I mean, how many times do families sit around for Sunday dinner anymore and spend 4 or 5 hours just talking to each other and cooking together, setting up and cleaning up afterwards, and maybe reading a couple books to the kids and the grandparents? It doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
So yeah, let's get regressive, baby. I'm all for it.
Well, we recently, with our homeschooling, we told our kids that they were only going to get 3 hours of TV during the week, and they could have another 3 on the weekend. And I said, this is going to improve your education. And they're like, what? They had the worst, but it's changed everything. They were really upset about it. They don't fight. They play together nicely. The older children are teaching the younger ones. It's just amazing to me. And it's so much
involvement.
Better.
Yeah. I think it's a brilliant idea. Now, Scott, how does that impact your football watching?
Well, if Daddy's watching, then you're allowed to free TV.
So that's the free pass, right?
Well, Sean, to be honest with you, we actually canceled our cable last year.
We did. Believe it or not. We watch on the internet, and the little stick ball moves on the internet guy, runs it down with little thing.
My dad almost had a heart attack when I did that. So.
Yeah, I was going to say,
really entertained by that.
You canceled your cable last year, and so you're getting regressive. You're out ahead of the curve, or behind the curve, if you will. You're getting back behind the curve.
I'm becoming aggressive, not regressive.
Folks, I only have a few minutes left to go. I do have a couple very important questions. First, where can everybody find your book besides shrmedia.com?
I didn't get it on Amazon. Rebels just got picked up by iBooks, so all the Rebels series should be on iBooks. So Rebels is everywhere you ever want to get a book. The Last Enchantress is strictly on Kindle, so you can only get it on Kindle. So at Amazon, which is Amazon. So
awesome.
But Rebels is also available to hard copy on Amazon if you're a hard copy reader. So
and tell everyone your website.
ScottandJudithPowell.wordpress.com.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for joining us, Scott. Real quick question. Red Sox fan?
No, actually, believe it or not, a Los Angeles Dodgers fan. I know.
All right. Well,
that was a
you said you were from Vermont. You may have meant you were from Soviet Russia. Now,
I'm a diehard Celtics fan and Boston Bruins fan for the NHL.
You're a Bees fan. All right, then you and I can sit down and have a beer. I was going to say, if that commonality was gone, and if you didn't have one redeeming factor, this was never going to happen again.
Hey,
I'm
don't
not
let
gonna
Sean
lie.
push you around.
You understand? You do have to understand that Massachusetts is below Vermont. Means you have to look up to us. So
You guys, and you'll understand this. You realize you're just the pathway to Montreal for 18-year-old boys in Boston, right?
well, that was true for a lot of my friends in Vermont. We just got there a little faster than you guys did.
I can remember 21 years old driving through a blizzard through Vermont to get to Montreal because I had to get to St. Catherine Street.
Oh, wow.
And
Wasn't
that's
to get maple syrup and cheese? No.
it was to get it. Sure, we'll call it maple syrup and cheese if you want. 7.5-hour drive through a snowstorm. It had to be done. Thank you, folks, so much for joining us. Make sure you check out the book, read the book, tell all your friends about the books, the whole series, all 4 of them. Scott and Judith Powell, you guys are outstanding. Will you come back and join us again sometime?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Folks, we're going to take a break. You're going to hear right now the Windrock Wealth Weekly Financial Update, and on the other side, we're going to catch up on the rest of the news.